Thank you very much. First of all, I want to thank all our first responders, including our Department of Emergency Management, our Sheriff's Office, our Chief, and all our firefighters, and all the partner agencies I already mentioned. Today, we intentionally, our chair intentionally said our public was going to speak first before we even spoke, to listen to what you had to say. I know a lot of folks had to leave. They're probably having to go to work, go attend to family, but it was important for them to get opportunity to have all 5 supervisors and our CAO and our county council and all our staff hear their concerns, because it is very important to us. I did have questions prepared for our 2 representatives of Vistra, but our chair said that's not the format today. But hopefully, maybe if we could get a quick response, because I had as a form of a question. I'll just say I'll express them as concerns, and then maybe you could give a response. First of all, though, I think our public here in Monterey County and everywhere else in California that's dealing with this, I think they deserve to have an open, honest conversation and answers as well. And how did we get here? People have been asking, and obviously, if you look at the history of Dynergy and its natural gas powered facility history and oil powered steam energy producing capacity, eventually with the change in state laws, it phased out this power plant so that it was no longer economically feasible. At the same time, the state laws started changing with the support of many environmental organizations to have California reduce its carbon emissions and be less reliant on fossil fuels. So the state has enacted numerous laws that are now enforced by CARB, by the California Public Utilities Commission, the California Energy Commission, and many other agencies to now have the state move towards more green technology. But in order to be able to store the excess, California is primarily solar and wind. I think wind predominates in renewable energy today, but the contradiction is you need these other types of technologies to be able to make that shift to green energy possible in California. And I'm studying this up as all of you, and you look at the benefits. They say that the benefits to this technology: it helps keep energy costs down, which is on everybody's mind. It helps with grid reliability. You know, when we're having the blackouts in the state of California, this helps avoid that. And also, when you look at what made this site ideal to repurpose it from a natural gas power plant to what it's being used as today, obviously the transmission lines were there. They had water systems and other types of infrastructure that are needed for this type of battery storage facility. And the reality is today also we use lithium-ion batteries on our phone, our power tools, our vehicles, e-bikes, e-skateboards, e-scooters, many things. And you look at what's happening in other communities. San Diego and Otay Mesa in May of last year had one of these fires that lasted 11 days. But the fire departments there say these types of fires, not necessarily with battery storage plants, but just with these other types of equipment that we use each and every day, is becoming more frequent. They get at 2-3 fire calls in their local communities with these other types of items that people use in their everyday lives. But the question I had for Vistra, which hasn't been raised, is the design of what burned last Friday through Sunday. Obviously, if anybody looks at the layout of either the PG&E facility or the Vistra facility, you will see many of these trailer-like mobile battery containers or cells throughout most of the property. But this particular building that burned, which I toured with my staff Javier in 2023, I wasn't allowed to be able to take photos of it because they said it was trade secrets. They didn't want photos to be taken of it. But what was surprising to me was a very large building. This is the one where our chief said it's 800 feet by 75 foot tall, the MOS 300 building that burned. If walking through there, if I'm correct, and Vistra could correct me if I'm wrong, this was a repurposed old building, but it was filled with these different battery units, not necessarily the containers you see on the outside, but many of these battery units were much closer, from my recollection, to each other than what we see outside. And from my recollection, they were all so stacked on top of each other. Kind of, the best analogy to say is like Home Depot. I think there was 1, 2, 3, if I remember correctly. So if one of these units began burning at the bottom, there's some other battery units on top that would then start to burn, and then you have 3, and then obviously the proximity to the other rows of these battery units on the sides would exacerbate a fire. And I think that's why we saw this fire much worse than when we saw the previous fires, the previous fire at PG&E, which was only one of those container units. I think Vistra's previous ones were much smaller. I don't remember if they caught fire or not, but there was smoldering smoke. But I want to relook at that design as a cause for this type of fire and an increased danger, because there was so many battery units under one roof. If the fire sprinkler system was enacted when thermal runaway already is occurring, it exacerbates, it worsens a fire in that type of situation if H2O is falling on the flame. So that's one area where I think Monterey County has to relook whether allowing this design of so many battery units under one roof, if that should be phased out from use here in the future, because it does create a greater danger once thermal runaway takes place. The other things I wanted to just raise was the issue, does technology exist? People are brought up, does the technology exist once the cooling systems in these units are intend to keep the battery cool when it starts warming up. But once a fire starts and the thermal runaway occurs, does the technology exist to put that fire out? And I think the answer is what we heard from our local experts and the fires that we see happen in other parts of the state is the technology does not exist to be able to shut it. And that's why everybody keeps saying it's best to let that fire burn itself out. The other item I wanted to bring up with Vistra was obviously there's the footprint of what has burned on the site itself, and it did bring up concerns from the community about, is there toxic materials there on site? How quickly will Vistra come and clean it up? Because if there's another rainstorm and there's runoff, does that also send those toxins to the slough, to nearby properties? And if anybody Googles the PG&E fire a few years ago, PG&E in its report to the public and the media said any water that was used for fire suppression was collected. Soil samples were done. Soil that was contaminated by the site was removed. And somebody asked, where does that go? Usually toxic soils would go to Kettleman City or Buttonwillow in Kern counties, Kettleman City and Kings County, because those are the landfills that deal with toxic materials in our state. So that would be the other question. How soon will it clean up to not exacerbate a situation there where surrounding areas could be at risk? The issue of water testing, I think we need to be clear with the public. The water should be tested. It should continue to be tested. That gives reassurance to the public that we're doing everything possible to test what is a concern on their minds. And obviously, air quality, I think in the future, I think our fire departments, our sheriff's departments, our air resources board should have the equipment provided by Vistra to be able to test for these types of toxic gases in the future, and it could be instantaneously, whereas this time we had to wait for US EPA. If our first responders that are based here in Monterey County had that equipment, we perhaps could have got answers to the public much sooner. Last thing I wanted to mention was the plume modeling, because they referred to, I think, a presentation here in December 2022. PG&E and Vistra were here. Each had, I think it was Vistra that presented their plume modeling. And I want to go look back at the presentation, the slides, because they're available online. And if you look at Vistra's plume modeling, it was the worst case scenario modeling. It seemed to tell the public it would only be contained within the property itself. And obviously from the plume modeling that we got from the National Weather Service showed something dramatically different. So I just want that needs to be reassessed, whether that plume modeling needs to be relooked at, because it gave assurances to the public then that it doesn't seem to have panned out. And let's see here. Last but not least, I would say I think San Diego County just went through something similar a few months ago to make their policies on this more strict, require more transparency, more studies to be filed on this. I think we need to relook at our ordinance in Monterey County. But at this time, I wanted to just ask Mr. Ziegler or Mr. Watson if they have any response to any of those issues raised. And if not today, can we get answers from you at a future hearing, not too far from now? Yes, please.
What I'm hoping we can do today is commit to answering these questions and publicly as well, and meaning online, written, so that the community can have these responses, as I think they're critical to the nature of what we're trying to get from this overall, which is clarity around some of these ongoing issues.
Yeah, and yes, sir, and we'll answer them briefly, and then we'll follow up with more detail. But I believe you asked 3 questions. One of them was around the building that housed the event, and it is a repurposed, as you saw, a repurposed building that was used from back before 2000 with Pacific Gas and Electric when they owned the facilities. That was previously, we call it our 1 through 5 building. Those housed turbines of the old oil and gas units. And so the design for that, it is a warehouse style. And as you saw, there are different, the building itself was at the time attractive because of its seismic nature and its cooling capabilities. So we'll give you more information as it goes on, but I just wanted to answer your question. You are correct. That is the building that was involved in the event.
But Mr. Ziegler, if just so people could know, because if they haven't walked there, they wouldn't recall what was the layout like, how the design worked within this building. But was it true that there was multiple of these units? Am I correct in that description? Multiple units stacked in rows on top of each other.
Yes, sir. On the top level, there was a couple of double stacked. Again, we'll give you a layout to show you, but just specifically, there were 3 levels in the building, and it was really based on the old design. So we had to work in and around girders and old pedestals and the like. I would like to be more complete in my response, so that's why I'm kind of saying I will provide that information to you specifically, when we get that to you. But there in the upper level, I believe there was double stacked batteries, but I have to verify that, sir.
How many of those battery units were in total in the repurposed building?
There were 100,000 batteries. Modules, excuse me.
100?
100,000, yeah.
100,000 modules on the roof.
In the building.
Yes. Okay.
The second question was around the cleanup. So we're in day 5 here, and so we're obviously still not actually permitted in the building. We're just starting to get engineers close to it so that they can judge what we have. And then there's going to be a process by which, and we've done this before, as the community knows. We've recently decommissioned our old units 6 and 7, and there's a process for that, which the Monterey County will be apprised of that process, just like the demolition that we just performed. So that will be presented at a later date. We're obviously not even close to that process yet. So as soon as we get to that stage, then we will certainly be discussing that demolition process.
Okay, but any time frame? Obviously, residents are concerned.
I understand.
There's a storm, and I don't know how long it took PG&E to get in there and remove debris, but also do the soil sampling and any soil removal. Mm-hmm. So at this point, you can't give us a time frame.
I cannot at this point.
Thank you.
And then the last. Okay.
Oh, that's not how this works. Sorry.
Thank you. Those are your questions. Thank you, sir.
All right, Supervisor Askew.
Thank you. I'll just start by thanking all of those who are here today and those who are online and those who